Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Mixcast podcast. I'm Todd.
And I'm Tina. We're thrilled to have you with us, so grab your headphones, sit back, and let's dive into another exciting session. All right, so Trump back in the White House. I mean, how?
Yeah.
After losing in 2020, facing all those indictments, even surviving assassination attempts, he still wins against Kamala Harris. I mean, how is that even possible?
Well, it is fascinating.
You've sent me just a mountain of articles on this.
It really shows the power of incumbency, even when that incumbent is...
And it's wild.
Unconventional, to say the least.
Okay, so where do we even start unpacking this? I mean, the sheer amount of information is...
A good place to start
overwhelming.
is with understanding the unwavering loyalty of the Trump base.
Okay.
We see this reflected in the exit polls.
Yeah.
They remained a powerful force throughout the election cycle.
Right, like it wasn't just that they stuck around. He actually gained new voters.
Right.
Specifically, young, low-propensity male voters who hadn't participated in elections before.
That's the key here.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the old base.
Right.
It was new support, too.
Interesting.
This speaks to a wider trend.
Yeah.
Beyond just personality politics,
Okay.
Trump tapped into a deep well of frustration and disillusionment with the political system.
Okay.
And he did it by framing himself as the ultimate outsider,
Oh, interesting.
the one who could shake things up.
And that message resonated, especially when you consider the economic climate
Right.
and the hot-button issue of immigration.
Yeah.
Those were huge talking points
Absolutely.
during the election.
The economy in particular is interesting.
Okay.
Exit polls showed widespread voter dissatisfaction with the economy under the Biden-Harris administration.
Okay.
And here's the catch.
Yeah.
Objectively, the economy had been recovering.
So even though things were technically better,
Exactly.
people didn't feel it in their everyday lives.
Exactly. And Trump capitalized on that disconnect.
Interesting.
He hammered home the message that things were bad, that he could fix them,
Yeah.
and that traditional politicians had failed,
Right.
whether his solutions were realistic or not.
He gave people a sense of hope
Right.
and a target for their blame.
And that frustration likely got amplified with Biden withdrawing from the race.
Oh, absolutely.
His debate performance sparked concerns about his age and competency,
Yeah.
leading to Harris becoming the Democratic nominee.
That was an unforeseen twist.
Yeah.
And it undoubtedly threw a wrench into the race's dynamics.
Right.
Suddenly, Trump was no longer facing the establishment figure of Biden,
Yeah.
but Harris, who was perceived as more inexperienced. He quickly shifted his strategy,
Okay.
painting her as radical, incompetent, and ultimately not ready to lead.
And that leads us to the Republican primaries.
Right.
Trump just steamrolled through them,
He did.
even with big names like Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, and Ron DeSantis challenging him.
That's where his strategic maneuvering within the Republican Party comes in.
Okay.
He'd spent years cultivating loyalty,
Yeah.
installing allies in key positions within the RNC.
So he wasn't just playing the game, he was changing the rules. Exactly. And then the focus on election integrity. It wasn't just a slogan, it was a way to shape the narrative
Right.
and control the levers of power.
And all of this was happening alongside these relentless attacks on Harris.
Oh yeah,
Remember those?
the border czar label,
Right.
the constant attacks on her immigration stance.
It wasn't just disagreement, it felt personal.
Absolutely.
He called her low IQ, stupid, even a vice president.
It was a very calculated strategy.
Wow.
By attacking her so aggressively, he not only undermined her credibility, but also stoked fear and anger among his supporters,
Right.
which further solidified their loyalty.
And all of this was playing out against a backdrop of crazy controversies.
Okay.
There was even an assassination attempt on Trump.
The final weeks of the campaign were incredibly tense.
Oh, yeah?
Remember the Tony Hinchcliffe incident?
Oh, they were...
He's a comedian who made a joke about assassinating Trump,
Oh, right.
which, in this already charged climate,
Yeah.
caused a huge uproar. It added to the sense that things were spiraling out of control.
Right. And then Trump himself kept making these cryptic comments about Liz Cheney and more potential attempts on his life. It felt like anything could happen.
It was a perfect storm, really.
Yeah.
You had this deep-seated distrust of the system, fueled by economic anxieties
Right.
and anxieties over immigration.
Yeah.
Then you add a volatile political climate and a candidate who thrives on chaos.
Yeah.
It's no wonder people felt like they needed a strong man
Right.
to lead them through it all.
And that leads us to this almost unbelievable situation.
Right.
A convicted felon, the oldest person to ever be elected president,
Unprecedented.
is back in the White House. And we can't forget his sentencing for that New York conviction is still looming,
Right.
with other legal cases still pending.
Absolutely.
This is unprecedented territory.
It is.
So how did Trump, despite all of this, manage to claw his way back to the top? Let's rewind a bit and take a closer look at how this whole wild ride began.
Let's go back to the beginning, to the early days of his campaign.
Okay.
Remember, he officially announced his candidacy in November 2022.
Okay.
So shortly after the midterms, where Republicans, despite expectations, didn't see the red wave they were hoping for.
It's interesting he chose that moment
Yeah.
right after what many saw as a setback for his party
Yeah.
to launch his campaign.
It speaks to his personality and his belief in his own ability to defy expectations.
Right.
Right from the start, his campaign was about retribution.
Okay.
It was about doubling down
Yeah.
on his populist economic and social policies and his stance against immigration.
And he kicked it all off in Texas, of all places.
He did.
Specifically Waco.
Interesting choice.
Why Waco?
The location was no accident.
Okay.
He held his first rally there
Yeah.
on the 30th anniversary of the Branch Davidian standoff.
Wow.
The symbolism was potent. It tapped into this narrative of government overreach and the need to fight back against a system that's rigged against everyday people.
He framed his race as this final battle,
He did.
even calling himself your warrior, your justice, your retribution. It's like he was channeling this anger,
Yeah.
this sense of grievance,
Right.
and turning it into a powerful political weapon.
And it worked.
Wow.
His base was energized, and he started attracting new followers
Yeah.
who were drawn to his message of defiance
Right.
and his promise to shake things up.
And then came the indictments,
Right.
and things got even more complicated.
Yeah.
That's where we'll pick up in part 2.
It's okay.
We'll explore how those legal battles actually seem to fuel his rise,
Right.
and how the political landscape shifted in the months leading up to the election.
Sound good. So we left off with Trump facing multiple indictments.
Right.
You'd think that would derail a campaign,
Yeah.
but for Trump, it almost seemed to have the opposite effect.
Yeah. It's almost like the indictments fueled his base even more. It created this us versus them mentality, with Trump as the ultimate victim
Right.
of a corrupt system.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The first indictment from the Manhattan District Attorney involved hush money payments.
Right.
But instead of hurting him,
Yeah.
his poll numbers and fundraising actually went up
That's wild.
after the conviction.
Almost like a badge of honor.
Yeah.
It solidified his image as this fighter,
Right.
someone willing to take on the establishment, even if it meant breaking the rules.
And it had a chilling effect on potential rivals within the Republican Party.
Oh, interesting.
Anyone thinking of challenging him
Yeah.
saw how fiercely his supporters rallied around him,
Right.
and they knew they'd be facing an uphill battle.
So the indictments, ironically, helped him consolidate power within the party.
Exactly. It made him seem almost untouchable, even in the face of legal challenges. And then there was that shocking turn of events during the presidential debate.
Oh man, Biden.
Yeah.
Everyone knew he was up there in years,
Right.
but that debate performance,
Yeah.
it really raised questions about his ability to continue leading the country.
His gaffes, the moments of confusion,
Right.
it wasn't just fodder for late-night comedians.
Yeah.
It sparked genuine concern among voters
Right.
across the political spectrum.
And it led to calls for him to step aside, which he eventually did,
Yeah.
paving the way for Kamala Harris to become the Democratic nominee.
This was a pivotal moment in the race.
Yeah.
Suddenly the dynamic shifted.
Right.
Trump, the anti-establishment candidate, was now facing off against Harris,
Right.
who, despite being the sitting vice president,
Yeah.
was perceived as less experienced on the national stage.
And Trump seized on that.
He did.
He painted her as radical, incompetent, too inexperienced to handle the job.
Yeah.
He basically used the same playbook he used against Hillary Clinton back in 2016.
And it resonated.
Yeah.
Especially with voters who were already feeling uncertain and anxious about the future.
Right.
They saw Harris as a risky choice.
Yeah.
And Trump, despite all his baggage, as the more predictable option.
Speaking of baggage, we can't forget about the assassination attempts.
Right.
Those were chilling reminders of just how volatile the political climate had become.
The one at his golf course in Florida was particularly unnerving.
Right.
It really drove home the point that this wasn't just political theater.
Right.
There were real dangers involved.
And it played into this narrative that Trump was constantly under attack.
Right.
That his opponents would stop at nothing to take him down.
Yeah.
It made his supporters even more protective of him, more determined to see him win.
It's like it created a siege mentality.
Right.
And that's a powerful force in politics.
Yeah.
It can make people overlook a lot of flaws if they believe their leader is the only one standing between them and chaos.
So we have this perfect storm brewing. Economic anxiety feels about immigration, a divided country, a sense that the system is rigged. And then you add in the drama of the indictments, Biden's withdrawal, and the assassination attempts. It's no wonder Trump managed to pull off this improbable comeback.
But the question now becomes, what does this victory mean for the future of American politics?
Yeah, what happens when a figure like Trump, with his history, his legal troubles, his divisive rhetoric, is back in the most powerful position in the world?
That's what we're going to explore in part 3.
Okay.
We'll look at his potential domestic agenda, his approach to foreign policy, and the broader implications of his second term for American democracy.
So we've covered Trump's wild ride back to the White House. We've talked about the factors that led to his victory and the potential chaos brewing on the domestic front. But what about the rest of the world? What does a Trump presidency mean for global politics?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the sources we've looked at paint a pretty mixed picture. Some world leaders seem to be cautiously optimistic.
Okay.
Hoping for a more predictable and stable approach.
Predictable and stable with Trump.
Well, yeah.
I mean, didn't his first term involve trade wars, pulling out of international agreements?
Right.
And cozying up to some pretty unsavory characters?
That's exactly what has others on edge, particularly our allies in Europe. You remember his skepticism of NATO and his fondness for Putin. With the war in Ukraine still raging, that relationship with Russia is under even more scrutiny now.
So are we talking a potential sequel to those trade wars? I remember those tariffs on Chinese goods causing a lot of uncertainty in the global economy.
It's definitely on the table.
Okay.
Trump's economic nationalism hasn't gone away.
All right.
He's still talking about renegotiating trade deals
to
benefit American interests.
Right.
And he's not known for being subtle about it.
Yeah.
Whether this leads to full-blown trade wars is anyone's guess. But it's bound to create tension in international markets.
And what about the war in Ukraine? How will Trump approach that?
Yeah.
Especially given his history with Putin.
That's a huge question mark.
Yeah.
His past praise for Putin and his reluctance to criticize Russian aggression raised a lot of eyebrows.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if he takes a tougher stance this time around,
or
if he tries to broker some kind of deal, even if it means concessions from Ukraine.
It feels like we're holding our breath, waiting to see which way he'll jump.
Right.
A new Trump presidency, a war in Europe, a global economy, teetering on the brink. It's a lot.
It's a pivotal moment, no doubt.
Yeah.
The decisions made in the next 4 years will have ripple effects across the globe.
So after this deep dive, what's the takeaway for our listener? What should they be watching for as this new chapter unfolds?
Keep a close eye on Trump's early moves, both at home and on the world stage. Who he appoints to key positions. What policies he prioritizes. How he interacts with other world leaders. All of these will offer clues about the direction he's taking.
Don't just rely on headlines or partisan talking points. Dig deeper, consult a variety of sources.
Exactly.
And form your own informed opinions.
Exactly. And remember, history is being written right now. We all have a role to play in shaping the future. Whether it's staying engaged in the political process or simply having thoughtful conversations about the issues that matter most.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From Trump's improbable comeback to the potential global implications of his second term. It's a lot to process. But that's what the deep dive is all about.
Exactly.
We encourage you to continue exploring these topics, keep asking questions, and stay curious.
That's it.
And who knows, maybe we'll be back for another deep dive into the wild world of Trump's America.
Maybe so.
Until then, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.